Let's talk about another case study. This time around, it's an NPL SR mod, otherwise known as a non-performing loan in senior position that was resolved through a loan modification. So let's get into the details here. Our collateral was vacant land, which is generally a bad thing. I'd rather have a single family residential property that's owner occupied, but because the taxes were current on this deal, it does look like the borrower intends on keeping it. And we could expect this modification going into the deal and purchasing this non-performer. And it's also full equity, which is great news. So to break that down, the vacant land was actually worth $170,000, which is really great. I've seen a lot of vacant land worth less than $5,000. And because the taxes are current, that leaves that entire $170,000 to secure our lien, which was only $3,471. So that leaves us with a whopping equity coverage number of 48.977. And we took basically just the equity divided by the UPB. And because it's greater than 1, it is entirely covered and full equity. Another way to look at that is the CLTV, when a lower number is better. And that's just the first lien plus the second, in this case, just the first lien, divided by the fair market value. And because it is less than 1, in this case, just 2%, we've got plenty of equity securing this deal. So let's talk about a little more here. One is the purchase price. We paid $1,849 for this loan. Now, the balance was $3,471, so we got a pretty good price based on the fact that it was vacant land and a non-performing lien. And we ended up working out a deal with the borrower for $202.34 per month, which when you take that into consideration, annualized, divided by the cost basis or the purchase price, you can see that we were earning on an annual basis 131.32%. But hold the phone, because that is not the accurate return. And you'll see that when we get to the internal rate of return calculations in just a minute here. But first, let's talk about the borrower story. In this deal, the borrower had a rough patch. It was actually pre-COVID. This was a 2019 deal, I believe. And the borrower was coming out of a couple rough years, but actually was just getting back to work in the subsequent month of our conversation. So he was ready to start paying $200 a month because he really did want to keep this lot. And I don't blame him. It's worth $170,000 and he only owes $3,500. So we were able to get that modification started at just around $200 per month. So the potential internal rate of return is really interesting to look at on this deal, and it definitely illuminates a very important consideration around the time value of money. So before we just took the monthly payments annualized and then divided by the cost basis. But if we want to really incorporate the time value of money, we take the total amount collected on the deal minus what we paid for it, divided by what we paid for it, so essentially the ROI, over the months it took to exit the deal, divided by 12 to annualize that as well. So we take the $36.42, that's the total of all of the $200 monthly payments throughout the entire course of the loan, because this borrower actually paid their mod to fruition. A lot of borrowers do refinance, but this is a pretty small loan, so he was able to pay it off just in those $200 monthly payments. So minus our cost basis, divided by our cost basis, and then it took 23 months from when we purchased the loan to when the borrower made his final payment. So let's distill that down to 192% ROI divided by 1.92, which is 23 over 12. And that calculation then gives us the internal rate of return of 50.5%. So when we look at that original 130% return that we got on an annual basis, that is not accurate, because that is not a perpetual return that the borrower keeps paying forever, like a rental property, for example. Once the principal balance is paid off, this deal has been exited, and it worked out to a 50.5% internal rate of return. So a couple takeaways here. The big easy one, of course, you have to make sure to calculate your internal rate of return. If you're going into an investment just looking at the annual return and your ROI on an annual basis, you're missing the entire picture of the loan, and you can potentially overpay significantly. For example, if you thought that you were making 131% on this loan at $200 a month, you could have paid $5,000 for the loan. You wouldn't have, that 131% anymore. It'd be a lesser percent return, but you'd actually lose money when the borrower makes that final payment 23 months later, because then that cash flow has dried up and you never recoup the full $5,000 investment. Another takeaway here, and I'm gonna change my scene here. Another takeaway is current taxes. I mentioned this before, but the fact that the borrower was making their property tax payment was more important to us than the fact that it was just a vacant property. And just the same, if we had a single family property where the borrower was not paying the property taxes, I would rather take this vacant land deal because we had much more confidence that we were going to get a modification done. Now, you may have a different strategy. You may actually want to take back the property, especially with the vacant land. You're not displacing any borrower. So maybe your strategy is to acquire real estate and then build on it or rent it or flip it. But for my strategy, what I like to do when I'm purchasing loans is really borrower friendly. I want to get these borrowers back on track. So taking a look at deals like this where the taxes are current, or if you're in second position, the senior lien in front of you is current, just gives you more confidence that that borrower is going to come through with some type of modification agreement. And yes, in fact, they did this time around. So that's it for this one. I'm going to, I just kind of ruined it, but I'll see you on the next video.